here's the deeper truth. Choosing authenticity was the moment your freedom began, even if it came with a loss, even if it came with loneliness, separation. And so the pain wasn't from being the black sheep, the pain came from what you had to sacrifice before you stepped out of that role. And there's usually a moment, whether it's at a family gathering or you're on the phone, or maybe you're walking away from a specific interaction with somebody when something inside of you says, I really don't fit in. I don't feel like myself. And I don't feel like myself anymore. And it's like realizing you've been wearing someone else's jacket. It kept you warm, sure. Maybe it helped you to blend in, but it never really quite fit. And once you notice the mismatch, you just can't unnotice it, right? You can't unfeel it. And that's the moment black sheep hit years before they can actually admit it. The moment the role starts slipping because you're growing into yourself. And so I love to offer reframes in this. Black sheep are usually the first in their family line to awaken. They're usually the pattern breakers, the cycle disruptors, the ones who walk out of the story everyone else is sort of still trapped in. And so losing the illusion of belonging doesn't feel like it's freedom. It almost feels like exile. But exile and expansion feel the same in the beginning. Imagine your family's in a foggy room where everyone sort of keeps the lights dim because dimming the light feels a bit safer. And you're the only one who's able to look at that door and think, why are we sitting in the dark? There's actually another way. Let me find that other way. And instead of them joining you, they ask, why are you being so difficult? But that moment you turned toward the door and found that other way, that was the initiation. It wasn't rebellion, it was clarity. It wasn't defiance, it was individuation, which just basically means becoming your own person. I resonate a lot with this because I feel like my entire life I was a black sheep. As someone who was raised by my grandmother and my aunts and not necessarily my parents, I've always kind of felt like I was on the outside. And I've always just made different decisions and never quite listened to everybody. Sometimes that worked out for me, other times it didn't work out. But in the end, it always works out the way it needs to work out. And I've always been the one who just made these what looked like crazy decisions, but they were just decisions that felt authentic and aligned to me. Like I was the first person who moved out of my hometown, like down the street, not down the street, but in the next city over. I was the first person to move out of the state. I was the first person to move out of the country. I was the first person who had a kid at a young age. So I did all these things. I mean, that's like not a black sheep moment, but I was always the one who just did things differently, thought differently, always wanted to explore, always wanted to question things like, why are we doing this way? And that would get me into a lot of trouble. And it was silenced a lot, especially in my family structure. And so I had to do a lot of healing around being able to use my voice for truth, for connection, for fulfilling my own needs. And I had to get comfortable with just being on the outside. And I started to realize that it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It just meant that I was willing to take some risks that people weren't. And again, it took me a long time to get comfortable with being on the outside because when you're sort of labeled as the black sheep or when you feel like you're the black sheep, it takes a long time before people actually join you on the outside. And sometimes people never fully join you. You might find your pack as you're sort of moving about the world. And and then you realize, oh, this is worth it. It's worth being my fullest and most authentic self because now I look at certain people in my life and it almost feels like they're missing out, right? Because they're kind of holding on to a certain story that reinforces that family structure that's rooted in that particular pain, particular trauma, and particular cycle. And there's always somebody in the family, again, that is there to break the cycle. And so when you refuse, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, to step into the role as the sort of black sheep, the one that just thinks outside the box, you're falling into the pattern of reinforcing a cycle that needs to be broken. And it doesn't have to be like this huge decision to break things. It could literally be as simple as saying no to things, saying yes to things. Like you don't need to move across the country and buy a one-way ticket like I did. It doesn't have to be that on that kind of grand scale. It just needs to be authentic to who you are and to no longer be held back by that fear of what people will think. Like I still work with clients who still struggle with that, to step into their own selves. When I mentioned the word individuation, like that's what we're here to do. We're here to find our uniqueness. We're here to build our own worlds, our own lives, and we're here to separate ourselves from the herd, from the pack, and create lives that are specific to our uniqueness. But we need to step outside the mold to discover what that uniqueness is. And if we don't, then we're going to be living some other people's lives, or we're going to be living under the rules and words of old conditioning from our family members. Like sometimes I have conversations with my clients, I'm like, yo, whose voice is in your head? Like, who is saying those things? And they have to stop and think, wow, like that's my mom, that's my dad, that's my aunt. Like those are the voices that are replaying. And until you sort of allow yourself to rediscover that through unconventional paths, you might still be kind of replaying those things. Yeah. So, but let's continue. Let's continue. Let's continue. Being yourself can sometimes often feel like you're betraying your family roots or the structure that you grew up in. But it isn't betrayal. It's just truth. It's living in full authenticity. This guy, an author, his name is Ben Crawford. He wrote a book called 2000 Miles Together, and he describes three paths black sheep often take. And these are real psychological crossroads. Most people move through a combination of them over the years. It could be all three of them, it could be two of them, but they're usually moving in and out. And so here they are. So the path one is living authentically, like I've spoken already, even when the cost is super high from the outside. And this path may look simple. It's like, oh, I'm just going to be myself. I'm going to go. But from the inside, it's anything but simple, right? It means challenging all those norms and belief systems that sort of kept you in that family structure. But it often means, like I said earlier, telling the truth when others want your silence. They want you to be agreeable, right? It's refusing behaviors your family often normalizes, and you're looking around like, oh, this ain't normal. Like this isn't what is normal, but this doesn't make sense, right? It's questioning beliefs taught as absolutes. Oh, we don't do this thing in our family. Uh, why, right? It's choosing emotional health over comfort. It's stepping onto a path no one else understands, and being okay with continuing to step on that path, even when people are like questioning you or looking at you or even judging you. And so, if you walk this road long enough, and you stop fitting the version of your family, what your family expects, or whatever structure you grew up in, sometimes that creates distance. Sometimes it creates conflict, sometimes complete separation. And it's not because it's what you asked for, but because authenticity pushed you beyond what the actual system, the actual structure could actually hold.